I myself, the producer of this podcast, is not eligible to diagnose anyone with a mental health disorder. This podcast is purely for artists discussing the mental health hurdles they struggle with on a daily basis. Enjoy. Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. And today I have the pleasure of, interviewing or talking with, I would say, an old friend. We stay in touch through Instagram. I spoke with, I met her through another friend of mine at college. We were, our mutual friend Keegan and Fuso. We loved film. And then she was like, well, one of my good friends is a musician, and you were in like, I don't know, I feel like you were in like 3 or 4 different bands, and you were doing shows like it seemed like every damn night. And I got to kind of like see you work in the studio and just talk with you, and I don't know, I really enjoyed your company. I would say, just overall artist, musician, Paige Mcmullen. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for that very
No problem, no problem. In case this is your guys, the listeners' first episode, I just want to kind of break it down for you. I do this with most episodes. I, have posted things on social media about, I'm looking for guests to come on my podcast and talk about mental health and the arts. Paige reached out and was like, I think, once again, our guests pick the topics we talk about. And Paige came up to me and she said, like, oh, I think, having, these 2 specific topics would be great. And the first topic we're going to be talking about is being queer in the art world, and maybe some of the mental health hurdles. I hate struggles, but hurdles you had to maybe overcome and you're still overcoming now. But yeah, I remember, um, I'll be very blunt and honest with you. Before I moved to Florida, I moved there in 2009. I was like 22 years old. I was very new to a lot of things. And I guess just being being around a lot of people who weren't like me, right? Like, well, straight for one, a lot of different ethnicities around in Jacksonville, where I went to school. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was a culture shock, because I felt like my parents tried doing the best they could of, having an open-minded like mentality, like growing up around the house and all that. But still, that doesn't. I went to a high school where there was like only like 4 or 5 black kids. If someone was gay or queer or anything like that, no one is kind of, they were hiding kind of thing. So I was very, it was a shock to me. And I don't want to say shock in a bad way. I feel like shock is always kind of a negative connotation, but it was like, it opened up my eyes, right? And a lot of people, it just, it opened, like, hanging with Keegan and hanging with all her friends. It was, you hear all these like stupid fucking, like, I guess, what would you call them? Stereotypes, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
I guess you want to call them that. I don't know, but you'd hear them, and and as a straight guy, you'd be like, well, it's this. It's, oh, well, if it's 2 lesbians, oh, they're gonna make out, and like, oh, they got to be like really hot and all that, like, typical like 20-year-old, like, that's how guys think, But man, and you see, like, you take off all these, you kind of let down a guard or something, and it's like people make a really big deal about who loves whom, like, it's like,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
really
for a variety of reasons.
yeah, and it's
Go to high school. Was it up in New
in New
Jersey?
Jersey,
Isn't
and
that funny coming to the South and then actually experiencing more diversity? I think a lot of people write off the South as kind of like a backwards place, which definitely like there's lots of oppression happening, but I think a lot there's because so much is so heated in the South and there's constantly like a lot of contention, there are these movements that are rising up and that are creating more vibrant communities that yeah, I'm glad that you had a chance to experience that.
yeah, I don't think I would ever want to. And I'm prefacing all this just to kind of give the audience of how, like, I met you, and my my interpretation of you and my experience with you, of just like, you were you're like, I don't think you're more than 5'1", but you're like a little firecracker. Like you are just you're mainly like I've seen you very like chill. Like we've smoked together, we've hung out together, like we've had a good time together. But then I've seen how you very passionate about a lot of stuff, and I think it's important, especially the time we're recording this with a lot of stuff going on. So, how long have you been in the arts? I feel like you do more than just music. If you want to tell the audience like what you do, like what kind of art you're into, and like how long you've been doing it for.
Yeah, I've been a touring musician for like 10 years. I would say like professionally, but that's very loosely. Prior to that though, I mean, I've been writing and recording music for like 20 years. Now that I think about it, because I'm 32. So it's been a minute, and, yeah, I mean, throughout that, I've also written music for the theater. We worked on, myself and Jeremy Nix, Leo Kulishevsky, a few other people within Jacksonville worked on our friend, Drew's, play, Sentences. We did some original score for that. Yeah, I've also assisted on, like, countless film sets and, like, various roles. You talk about our friend Keegan, we all kind of helped with the gray area. Been in the arts doing anything that I can do for probably taking it really seriously, which is we can totally unpack what that even means. That's my
Yeah.
own mental health, like me and my imposter syndrome. But, yeah, trying to go really hard with it for, like, 10 years.
I remember I've been with Keegan shooting a few of your like music videos for two of your different bands, like former bands. I don't know if they're current or former. Um, the one band Rice, I remember. You
Yeah,
doing
that
good
was my
stuff.
first band. We kinda
Wow.
came up in the same it was a beautiful time when we were around that age because we were, like, 20, 21, 22.
Yeah.
And I was in my first bands, y'all were starting your film careers, and, like,
Yeah.
we were all just learning together, which I
Yeah.
think was beautiful.
Yeah, it was a really good time. Warehouse Studios in Jacksonville. I know there's some history there. I thought that was kind of being around there. Like I've always been, and I can obviously start at any time, but I've always been like more envious of musicians because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like your craft is more like people want to see like behind the scenes of like musicians making music. Like there was a goddamn 8-hour documentary of the Beatles doing it, or just like I
People
don't
don't
know.
wanna see you sitting at a computer for, like, 12 hours editing.
No, they don't want to see that. Like, I guess they want to see the glitz and glamour of the behind the scenes of filming, but like, it's really not gets glitz and glamour to me if you're not really like an actor. Like, maybe pre production is cool and fun, but you know, as like the process of making music and I guess recording separate instruments, and all that. I think I would see Mikey Kettinger and James McMurray like record their stuff, and I would mainly see you recording, with your bands. You were very gracious enough to let us like just come and even hang out. So I felt like that process was really interesting, and that was interesting that I didn't know that Rice was your first band. You carried it very like you carried like you've been there. Does that make sense? Like there's times where I feel like not even now, but like other times I felt like I don't belong here. And that can go into our second episode we're going to record, imposter syndrome, but like I said, I wanted, you wanted to talk about like kind of the mental health struggles or hurdles you've had to face being a queer artist. Now, when was the first like how old were you when you came out?
So, that's a great question. I was 15, which I feel like is for some people, it's very young. For other people, like, I knew when I was, like, probably 8 that I was queer. Same as
Interesting.
any other, person kind of when you're, developing crushes on
Yeah.
other people and you're on the playground, whatever, you're, like, holding hands, like, I very distinctly remember being like, "Hmm, something is different."
It's different. That's interesting. At 8 years old, that's yeah, I can't remember that far back. But I think if there's something really I can't, but
You
if
need to quit smoking, man.
yeah, yeah, you don't need to tell me. I don't, but you're right. You're right. Um, there's like for you to kind of like be aware at 8 and then at 15, I think there's something like powerful in that a little bit, especially at 15, or brave.
Like, I'm a queer artist, I'm also, like, non-binary, I go by they, them, and she, her,
Okay.
so I like, in being, like, a young child, like, I definitely there is a certain point, and then even, if we talk about the gray area, there's a certain point with children where, like, a androgyny or, like, kind of a gender ambiguousness is
Hmm.
allowed until it hits a certain age, because I think it has a lot to do with, societal pressure. If you look at clothing choices, if you look at, modern literally everything, film, TVs, like, we start kind of socializing children to be a certain way at a certain age. And I definitely knew, when I was younger that there was, like, something different. I was like, I don't necessarily, I'm not attracted to men. I don't necessarily feel like a woman. Like, there was a lot that I was like, I don't know how to feel about this yet.
Yeah.
But, yeah, in my own kind of journey, yeah, I came out as a lesbian when I was 15.
To your parents, to a friend.
That is an interesting story. Yeah, so not intentionally, for sure. I was kinda outed by my
Oh no.
parents. Yeah. And I kind of I did have a tumultuous relationship with my mom. I, like, lived with my mom when I was younger. My parents are separated, so my dad lived in, South Florida. And, yeah, my mom, I guess, like, found a note in my pocket and, outed me, like, came to me. This is kinda traumatic, honestly, and
Feel free to
trigger
share it if you don't want to.
triggering for no, I'm happy sharing it, but definitely triggering for anyone who's, like, had, you know, uncomfortable moments with their parents invading their privacy. But, no, yeah, my mom, I guess, like, found a note, something, you're, like, a teenager, and it was like, "I love my girlfriend," or something,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
and she lost it. She freaked out. She was like, "What is this?" She threw the phone at me and, like, made me call my dad and was like, "You tell your father what you are." And I was like, "Oh, this is not how I expected this to go." And, it's funny now because, like, my mom and my father and I, like, we have a great relationship. Like, that was I mean, so many queer kids, so many people of the LGBT community, once their parents find out about their identity, they are ostracized from the family, or they're kicked out entirely, or worse, they're abused. I mean, it's horrible. So, for my mom to have that reaction, it was severe, but I mean, it's not even as severe as it could have been. And,
Mm.
yeah, we had a tumultuous relationship. I mean, at that point, I think I had been, like, out to my friends. Um, and that was I mean, once that happened, I did get kicked out for, like, a brief time. Not it was, like, related to that and also related to a lot of things. And, my mom and I, like, patched up our relationship, and we're super close now. And she's super supportive, which is really sweet. My whole family is supportive. I remember when, gay marriage was passed or it was, like, coming on the ballot, my grandparents, who are from the South, from Tennessee, very Christian, but, like, my whole family's interesting in that they're, like, not really practicing Christian. Like, they are, but they just say stuff. Like, they
Yeah.
just say stuff and say that Jesus said it, and I'm like, "That's not okay." You know what I
Not
mean?
it's not accurate.
They just make up their own, like, Southernisms, and they're like, "That's what Jesus said." And I'm like, "That's not okay." But yeah, my grandparents were like, "We voted for I just wanna let you know that we voted for gay marriage, for gay people to get married." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And they were like, "Yeah,
Did that
'cau"
make you feel good, or were you like,
it really did.
nice?
'Cause I mean, being in the South, like, I had a close relationship with my family, and it was important to me. So I wanted to keep a relationship, and I wasn't sure how it would look. I wasn't sure if, it would be that thing where, like, I was accepted, but, like, we didn't really talk about it,
Mhm.
and there's just so many variations of, anytime you're part of the LGBT community, like, yeah, there's people have their opinions for religious reasons and so many reasons that have nothing to do with you and your own identity, and you kinda have to navigate that and tiptoe around it. So I was glad that at least with my family, there is definitely support now.
That's great. Now it's, you know, I have a lot I want to like kind of just say and unpack and ask because it's, I mean, like I'm 34 years old and I don't know, it never, like I don't know, like I don't want to say anything stupid or sound dumb, but like hanging, like meeting Keegan and like seeing how people would call her a guy and like she'd laugh at my reactions to it because I'm like they have to know you're a girl. They're just being an asshole. And like Keegan's like, this has been my entire life. Like there's really no when she said to me, like, seriously, she was joking, well, not joking, she was laughing, but she was also very serious, like, Chris, there's really like no need for you to get upset because like this is never going to change. And I was like, damn. I was like kind of like, okay. And then just kind of walking with her or being around a bunch of her friends and just seeing the faces people make, it's just, I don't know, it's just weird. And I don't want to chalk it up to like, oh well, it was 20, it was 2010, or it was, it was not as accepted as it is now. But like I still feel like, I don't know, maybe this is
There has been a lot of, forward movement, I would say, in terms of the art scene, in terms
yeah.
of acceptance of, people of the LGBT community within kind of a more mainstream creative society, but it's still an issue.
Oh yeah, it's, yeah, I think it's, I think it's gonna be for,
Like Lil Nas X, who are like the top of the charts right now and are so openly queer, like he's still getting death threats. Like it's
people also say too, like someone, I saw some bullshit online that someone said like, well, he's just like he's pretending to be gay or something like that. Like it's all for show. It's all for that. It's like,
because
it's
it's like, what is it trendy now?
what, but like what would, but why would you pretend to be something that,
Be hated for that, and now that we're like, okay, fine, we're gay. Everyone's like, you're just doing
you
that
know
to
what,
be like,
Paige, yeah, you know what? So am I. So it's like people are like, what, yeah, what? By I think I'm gay too. It's like, it's like, okay, um,
I think it's so funny you talk about that because I do think because queer, like when we talk about queer representation in media or like in music or anything, there hasn't been much. And like, I shouldn't say that because there has been a lot, but it's been suppressed and it's been considered niche, like a niche market.
have you heard of the movie Dog Day Afternoon, or of the story of that movie?
Tell me.
By any okay, so it happened back in 1972. My dad was in the FBI. He was his task force was on this specific job. It's a movie with John, the Fredo from Godfather, and Al Pacino. And Al Pacino's the main character, and he robs a bank in Brooklyn, and you kind of don't find out until the second act that he's robbing it so him and his boyfriend can run away together and the boyfriend can have a sex change. Like, that's a movie that was made in 1975 that got
With Al
fucking
Pacino.
that got greenlit with Al Pacino. That got greenlit with Al Pacino. And my dad said it happened in like 1968 or 69, and this was a real story. And my wife got me into Schitt's Creek. I was like, what's it about? I'm not sure what it is. And I really didn't know personally that that character was the first kind of non-binary character on TV when that TV show just started in 2016. So that puts some perspective into it. It's like, wait, this is the first non-binary character, and it came out in 2015. What's happening here?
Coded, uh, coded characters, but for sure.
But not outwardly, and like the parents talk about it, and the parents are fine with it. So I have a question for you. What are things that both make you happy in Hollywood when they represent queer, like just being queer, and what really turns you off? Like, if you can give some examples. What do you love seeing versus what do you think is just so like stupid, if that makes sense, and that just bothers you?
Oh, yeah, I would say, like, so I am really sick of seeing, like, the tragic gay trope. So using queer people, using people of the LGBT community, as like a sob story. Like, "Oh, they have AIDS," or like, "Oh, there's something oh, they're in love, but then one of them dies." Like, it's always some shit like that where it's
Yeah.
like 2 lesbians and then one of them dies. That trope needs to die.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of on the
No
nose,
pun
but,
intended, but
no pun intended.
yeah.
But truly, like, if I think about, like, really good queer media, like, there's a lot coming out now, but specifically the show Pose and how when they were creating that, the producers, the show writers were like, "Look," first of all, they hired trans writers, which anytime that you're going to be doing a show, a movie, anything, you need to hire writers that are actually experiencing the story. So, like, for Pose, they hired trans writers, and they were so adamant on, like, "We're going to write a story about joy, about, like, queer joy,
Mhm.
instead of having this, instead of having, like, these tropes of, like, "Oh, here's the people, they're isn't their life so sad?" Like, we've been kind of conditioned to show like, if you think about it in the '90s, like, Boys Don't Cry, like, these stories of just, like, absolute, uh, abuse and horrendous death, and I'd like to move away from that, please, and go towards happier stories, and then more than anything, uh, basic ass stories, just movies, music made by queer people. And the focus doesn't necessarily have to be that they're queer or trans or non-binary or part of the LGBT community. It's just it's from a different perspective. You know what I'm talking about? Like
Yeah.
as a filmmaker, like it could be literally a story about someone who works at a grocery store. But like if it's written from a queer perspective, if it's shot by a queer director, there's going to be a completely different eye to the experience. And so,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
promoting that, promoting more diversity within.
Yeah, and I know I brought up Schitt's Creek, but like I said, Dan Levy's writing most of it, producing it, directing it. People want to always throw in nepotism. Oh, he wouldn't be there without his dad. No, he's very much more talented. Like, he's very much as talented as his father, and you have to, yeah, and you have to be, um, it's, and you kind of hear, like, what's his name, like Jim Parsons of Big Bang Theory. He's like, I don't think I'll ever play a straight character again, and it's like, kudos, man. Like, it's, yeah, 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 yeah. That too. Yeah, that too. He spent 12 years like doing network television, so maybe that was it. But a lot of actors who are coming out who are gay, they're like, yeah, I'd rather just kind of stick to stories I want to tell, because some if someone is into their 30s and 40s and they haven't come out and they feel like they're quote unquote living a lie, they could say that's how it is with acting as someone else. I've had people ask me all the time, like, "Oh, Chris, would you, ever play a gay character or this and that?" And it's like, well, I don't want to take a role away from anybody. Like, I think it's yeah, but if I were to, I wouldn't, I would want to make sure it's not like mocking it, making fun of it. I
Been definitely really respectful portrayals, like Keanu Reeves and, River Phoenix in, like, My Own Private Idaho comes to mind.
I watched that for the first time over the pandemic, not knowing really what it was about because I was just kind of on a River Phoenix kick. I was like, I needed, I everyone said he was the next James Dean, and like my buddy and I said, like, he would have been like him, my buddy and we were like, he probably would have been like same with like Heath Ledger, like where would have these two like really great crafts and artists be?
So sad, and did you know they lived in Gainesville?
Yeah, well, I found out about that they were born there.
His music?
I didn't know he did music.
He was a musician more than anything, he wanted to be a musician. You should listen to it, it's pretty.
Yeah, no, I don't. I still listen to a lot of I keep going back to my mom. I'm like, I'm still listening to the music. Like, did you play this a lot when we were kids? Because I just can't not listen to it. And she's like, yes.
That too, where I'm just like, "I saw the sign." I'm like, "What the?" And then I, like, remember I was, like, going to kindergarten in my mom's car, and that song played every day for, like, 4 years.
I've been trying really hard to write because I just haven't been able to write a lot lately. And then like I put on Third Eye Blind's like self-titled album, and I'm like, Mom, you like front to back, this shit was yeah. I was like, I bumped this in my car. If someone sees me, they're gonna laugh at me and tell me to go back to '96. And she's like, well, that shit was good. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's interesting. Nice, nice, yeah. So yeah, no, that's a good example about my own private Idaho, my very own private Idaho, and that movie was really, really something to behold and to watch. So, kind of going back, I didn't want to veer too off. I apologize, but like for you, how were you, or how have you been treated differently than others who in the music industry specifically who aren't queer? Yeah, like because
Artists, anyone from the LGBT community for a long time, it's felt like a niche market in music, and, like, the same goes for queer films, like we were talking about, like, it was when, what's that one film? Oh my, I can't believe I can't remember the name. Brokeback Mountain. When Brokeback Mountain came out and it had, like, large distribution, it blew like, everyone was insane about it. So, like, for a long time, queer music was considered like this taboo subject that was artsy, but it was hard to be mainstream and to be openly queer.
yeah,
And I remember like certain artists obviously being queer, but so many are in the closet. So many intentionally change the pronouns in their songs to fit a heterosexual narrative. Speaking of people like Lil Nas X, who's I bring him up because he's like the biggest artist that I can think of, and I love
right
him.
now, yeah, no,
I love
he's
him. So yeah, originally in a lot of his songs, he was singing about women, and he did that to basically
appeased. Yeah.
satisfy and appease the studio, and now he's doing his own thing, and it is so much better. It's amazing.
That's funny. And same with like Frank Ocean. Like I know Frank Ocean is bisexual, so like everyone's like his song Forrest Gump. What like why is he singing to Forrest? I was like, guys, he's singing from the perspective of Jenny. Okay. It's like because he's singing from a perspective, it makes sense now. But if it was Frank singing to another man that way, but like Bad Religion, his song Bad Religion, he talks about falling in love with a man, and everyone's like, wait, what? Like it's. But I think if you're just you're a Frank Ocean and you're that big, you know, I don't know. I don't think his career got affected by it. Or do you, maybe you might know more than me. From the outside of not knowing music, it didn't really seem like that.
Out and I mean, he made like a Tumblr post or something. I
Yeah,
remember when
yeah,
that happened.
so did
And
I.
yeah, especially being, in the hip hop community, being in the R&B community, that is its own very complicated subset of
So yeah.
music genre that, yeah, has a hard time with homosexual artists. And I think more than anything, I think the struggles that I've had is like people not taking you seriously. Like people, because like we're like, hey, like for example, me being in the band Tomboy, which was a queer band based out of Jacksonville, and we labeled ourselves a queer band, and people are like, why are you doing that? Like your music isn't like, how is your guitar gay? And we were like, you don't understand. Like it's important. So like it's important to represent your identity, and it's important to own how you identify, because if you don't, others are going to do it for you. So when you're a queer person, a person of color, your identity is inherently political. So I think coming out and saying this is who we are and taking ownership of that, in like driving the conversation instead of having people label you or put you in a box, like being able to say that now is really powerful. And I feel like for a long time, saying that put you at a disadvantage. And now people don't care.
No.
Like there's so much more access in terms of streaming, in terms of just putting your music out on the internet. You don't have to rely on record labels anymore. So you can completely own who you are, and you don't have to suck up to some large label that's only creating cookie cutter musicians.
Now I
You
feel
can
like
be
they're
like,
looking for artists with
and
different.
now, yeah, and so now the conversation has
Yeah.
changed, and it's a lot more, diverse. Could always be more diverse, but it's
Definitely.
I feel like things are constantly arching upwards. Um, Not so much in terms of the Supreme Court, but definitely in terms of
Music and arts, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to bring up that, like, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me. The first band I saw you in was Rice. Then all that was all men in the band. Then Summer. Shit. Okay, then I'm wrong there. Yeah, Summer was awesome. And then I know Summer was with Four Families, which I loved listening to their music. And then you were in a band with Daryl Green. I don't know what band that was called. You were Universal Green. It was like an 8-person band. I felt like hip hop band, which was that. And you were the only girl in that band, right? Or am I striking out here again?
listen, homie. So I would say Mama
Was she in that? Okay, cool. All right.
and, what else? Yeah, Mama Blue was
Okay. So I swear to God, I did have a point to this. Yeah, there was a lot of people. I was saying that you went from those two bands to then Tomboy, and it was you, Summer, and Alex, and like I saw you guys live. I saw you cover "Are You That Somebody" by Aaliyah, and I lost my shit. I heard you guys. I have it on my playlist. My Boo. You did the My Boo with featuring Boyfriend. Like I loved your guys' sound. Like it was so much different than things I heard you be a part of in the past. You know, Rice was more to me. It was very indie, very very indie. You Universal Green, like you were. It was like you see that a lot now, like Anderson Paak, like hip hops and drums, or maybe you've always seen it. You know, like it had it reminded me a little of an Outcast and the Roots. Yeah, yeah. It reminded me a little bit of that. Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of that. And then you have Tomboy, where me personally, I never heard anything like that before. You know, because we live in a world where it's always comparisons, right? Like this movie is compared to this band's compared to this, you could tell the influence from it. You could sit here and tell me what maybe some of your influences were, but I, like on the surface, hearing you guys live, hearing you guys on Spotify, I can't definitively say Tomboy sounds like anybody else, right? And then that's a really and that's a powerful move. Yeah.
I mean, as a band, we're really coming into our own as people, owning our identity. Like I said
Mhm.
before, it was very much a band focused on the LGBT community and the experience of all of us.
Because it was everyone was queer in the band, from my understanding, and yeah.
Yes, and I think you can see, like, in that, yeah, like, the music was so good. I mean, it felt really good to
Be yourself. Would you say that was the most like you felt like like peak creativity in ever, or like have you done other stuff where you're like not peak? I hate saying peak because there's always when you say peak, there's a you're coming down kind of
I'm gonna
thing.
go ahead and spill the tea and
Okay,
say, "No, that was
cool.
not peak creativity," which is funny. I mean, it probably was to a certain extent. With Tomboy, like, uh so Tomboy was a three-person band. It was myself, played guitar, Summer played drums, and then Alex sang and did production beats and, like, played guitar. And each of us kind of did our own, uh business side of the band. I would say that was the first band where we all literally treated it as a business. We signed up for an LLC. We
Nice.
were working with colleges and we were getting paid as a vendor. We were doing taxes. It kind of killed the fun. If anyone else is out there, don't wait to do an LLC. If I can
Yeah.
give anyone any advice, wait to do an
Wait on the LLC.
F2. Don't do it yet, unless someone's trying to sue you, I guess, and then do it because that protects you, but, no, it was the most business-minded and I wanna say focused band. Creatively, there was this offshoot of Rice called Wave Functions,
Yeah. Okay. All right.
and that, I swear to God, that was my favorite band I've ever been in my life, and we
Why
we
is that?
it lasted, I don't know, it was a good group of people, and it was really crazy psychedelic rock. So I was playing really fun stuff, and I was almost like I was playing really intense guitar that is not, I guess as you get older as a musician, or like for me, I'm learning that less is more. You know, you wanna give space, you wanna have negative space, you wanna let the music breathe. But back in the day, I was just going so hard, playing like every note I could possibly play, and, that was a lot of fun. So, yes, Wave Functions. I doubt anyone could find any information on that band, so it will remain a secret.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I don't even remember that. I don't even remember that band. So maybe, yeah, like I'm saying, I'm not saying I was like heavily involved in like what you guys are doing, but even like, Keegan would be like, "Hey, Paige is playing tonight. You want to go see her? Fuck yeah, let's go." But it would always be with like Universal Green. Yeah, but it was fun. It was so much fun at Underbelly. You guys were just no at where downtown. Oh, that was probably my favorite venue to go watch. I don't know why. I just felt like it. It's like the stage was. Maybe I'm just didn't realize it because every time I was there, I was blasted. But like the stage was higher, and it was a big. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, exactly, exactly. So what were some what are some struggles of being a queer artist, and I don't know if you want to talk about today or in 2022 or what you have you said you've been doing art for 20 years, so you're 12, you came out when you're 15, like where was the yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so it's a professional struggle for sure.
There were, and there still are, a lot of struggles. I mean, exposure, like we were talking about, not being taken seriously because you're not appealing to the large mass of the audience, whatever that means in terms of fucking, studios.
Mhm.
Um, Touring, I think, is probably a very if there's one thing that, like, people can take away from this conversation, it's that touring as a queer artist, like, it can be dangerous, just straight up. Like, depending on where you are, depending on I mean, I have been chased, by I can tell I don't wanna tell a crazy story because 'cause we're, like, being serious, but basically, like,
I
one
mean,
time Tomboy was in Utah? Provo or Salt Lake? I don't remember, and we were playing at a gay bar. We were a gay band playing at a gay bar, and, this dude was, like, taking shots with me and, like, buying me shots, and I thought he was gay because we're at a gay bar,
yeah.
and, and then at the end of the night, he was not gay, and he was like, "Hey, I want to, like, get your number. I wanna, like, hang out with you," and I was like, "Oh, no. I'm in a gay band called Tomboy. We're up playing at a gay bar, like, what are you doing here?" And, I was just like, "No, sorry, buddy, like, no." And I was loading the van out, like, in an alleyway after the show, like, by
By
myself,
yourself?
and he came out there, and I was like, "Oh, shit," and I, like, jumped in the van, and I locked the doors, and he started, like, trying to open the van and, like, get me out of the van. It was insane. And then Alex and Summer had to, like, I was, like, texting them. I was, like, on the floor of the van, like, "This dude is trying to break in, like, please help me." And, like, Summer and Alex had to come out and, like, escort him out. The dude eventually got kicked out, and then fucking, we're, like, finally done with the show. It's, like, 2 or 3 in the morning, and we're getting paid, and someone calls the bar, and the bartender's like, "Is there a Paige here?" And I'm like, "I swear to fucking God, if the" and he's like, "It's this dude, Michael." I'm like, "Oh my God, like, what the f" like, this dude was kicked out of the bar. It was insane.
That's
So,
nuts.
that like, you always run into issues in certain places, like, obviously, we're from the South. I would say if you're touring as, like, a queer musician, it's really important to have a support system and to reach out to people in like, Tomboy had to do this for sure, like, we had to make sure that we knew who we were booking through, and we had to know the people that we had to know the bar that we were playing at. Because
So
if we were
how do you
playing at,
do
like, a
that?
neo-Nazi bar in Salt Lake, then, like, we're about to sing a bunch of songs about being gay to, like, neo-Nazis, like, I would say reach out to for any queer musicians that are listening to this, like, reach out to if there's a girls rock chapter in that town, Girls Rock, is a wonderful nationwide organization that focuses on teaching, girls, gender nonconforming youth, um, instruments and how to be in a band. It's also very social justice focused. It's a wonderful group, and, looking for DIY organizations, uh getting on honestly, Facebook can sometimes be helpful, Facebook groups, going on Instagram, just look for other queer people in the area, other queer artists, reach out to them, and then be like, "Hey, what are the venues that are, like, queer friendly?" Autostraddle.com, I don't even know if they're still doing that, but they would have, like, queer city guides for, like, every city in the US. And this is very US based. I can't speak on an international level. I can only really
Yeah.
talk about the US and where I've toured. Um, but yeah, Autostraddle, we used to check Autostraddle's queer city guides to like find gay community, queer community, and, yeah, reaching out to people directly, having that support system, and not just reaching out blindly, which again is a struggle. It's a privilege to be able to be like to be a band and be like, "We're just gonna play a random bar in a city." It's different to be like a queer person and be like, "I can't play there because like someone might literally assault me." So like you definitely have to be mindful. And kind of protect yourself in that way. Just during traveling because, you never know, where you're going and kind of what the scene is like there. So, I would say touring presents certain struggles, but,
And see, that's things that
uh
I didn't even think about.
yeah, I mean, I've had the opposite of that where we've gone to, like, places like can't even think, like Fort Pierce, Florida or something? Fort Worth, that's in Texas. We went somewhere in Florida and we played a show to 4 queer people, and they were, like, the only queer people in that entire town, and they were like, "Thank you so much for coming. There it's just us, like,
Wow.
we just wanted to see other gay people," and we were like, "Yeah, hell yeah." So, like, yeah, it's really great to find a community and find, uh, your people, your fans that are going to really identify with what you're singing, what you're playing about, whatever it is that you're doing. Because at the end of the day, like as a musician, it's about you and it's about your creation, but it's also about how that creation interacts with the audience. And like, you don't want to play to a bunch of people that fucking disrespect you. You don't want that. You want to play to people who are gonna like resonate with the experience.
Yeah, it's actually kind of um it's interesting that like with that specifically, you know, with touring at least, rehearsed, practiced your art craft and for months, and it's a very vulnerable thing, um because you're going out, in front of in a different city every night, every other night, different crowds and all that, and you're kind of just being vulnerable every night. That takes a lot out of you, in my opinion. So like for people to flat out say like we love you or we don't love you, like that's tough to take as well. As far as like when film goes, is like, yeah, you spend a lot of time getting it, playing it, showing it to an audience, and you hope that the audience that you're showing it to, most of them are there to like watch your project, whether it's like just like you screening it yourself or a film festival. So it's a little bit different, because the vulnerability like happens like when the final project is done, but like the in music, the vulnerability is like from like the moment you put that pen to paper, right? So I mean, and like I said, you don't even think about issues that may happen with a queer artist or queer band like touring across the country, because you have, for me, because it's probably more, heavily liberal in New Jersey, that doesn't mean it's that way in Wyoming, in Texas, in Maryland, in Pennsylvania. Like, no, you have to be very careful.
It depends, it totally depends, and not to say that, yeah, that any place is worse or, more dangerous than the other in terms of being, like,
Hmm.
a queer musician, but it is important to find, those pockets of community, and they're always there, and they're always hungry for some wonderful musical representation.
So on the flip side of that, why is being a queer artist, that label, or your queer band, let's say, why is it important to represent that? And that might be an obvious question, but I would love to hear your answer on that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, like I said earlier, like, it's important to own how you identify because at the end of the day, people are going to ascribe that identity for you. Like if you don't own who you are, others are going to do it for you. So when you're a queer person, your identity is political and other people are going to impose those policies and those beliefs on you.
Hmm.
So taking ownership of that I think is driving the conversation instead of having other people lead.
Okay.
And
That, yeah, that's.
like that it's just how it is. Like because I am a non-binary person because I'm part of the LGBT community, like it's people are going to have certain opinions, like you said earlier, certain stereotypes, and it's important to come out and own who you are, like we were talking about imposter syndrome. Really be confident in who you are, and other people will appreciate that, and hopefully they'll be confident in who they are too.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, and we can talk about it in our next episode that we do, but like being a confident person in general to be an artist is tough, and then you have to be confident in your own skin, and you're by society deems you different, as I throw up air quotes, when necessarily no one is different. Yeah. To navigate through that must have been so terrifying as a kid, but I feel like, and I don't know if you're feeling this way, because like I said, we're in our 30s, never thought we'd get there. Or I can't speak for you. For me, it's kind of like I'm in my 30s, all right, let's go. I'm more like kind of comfortable with who I am and like what I feel and how I feel more than anything. Like I don't, I'm an advocate of telling people I go to therapy. I'm very vocal about that. I am not afraid to necessarily like cry in front of my wife. There are sometimes in front of my friends when like I'm just straight up not having a good time, bro. That meme, like when I'm just not like when shit's not going well. Like I used to be very like, oh, should I do that? Should I do, but you kind of got to express who you are. So then people will be like, all right, this is Chris, like inside and out, Before we wrap up this episode, is there any words of encouragement or any advice you'd love to give to young artists who identify as queer, who have, if they're listening, hopefully, and whether they have come out or not, I would love for you to kind of give words of encouragement or any advice that helped you along your path so far.
Totally. I would just say continue to pursue your passion in spite of pushback. There's always going to be people who doubt your ability and make you doubt yourself, but believe in what you're doing. Even now, I have to remind myself that what I'm doing is important. And the most important thing is that it's important to you. I mean, everyone, like, yes, I'm a musician. Yes, I've toured for 10, 20 years, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, everyone's a musician. Everyone's a creative. Everyone has the capacity to create in some form, and creation doesn't have to be for, like, monetary gain. It doesn't have to be for any other reason other than creating. So and it feels good.
Yeah.
So I definitely would say to just continue to pursue what you're doing and continue creating. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. Paige, thank you for coming on and talking and catching up. It was a really good time chatting with you. I'm really excited for our next episode. But yeah, thank you very much for being on here, telling stories, being vulnerable about a topic that meant a lot to you.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And guys, I hope you are continuing to enjoy the podcast. This is Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. Until next time. Once again, this is Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. I'm host and producer of the podcast, Christopher Orangeo. All episodes will be available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, and Amazon Music. Once again, this is Chris Orangeo, and thank you for supporting.